Hey guys, tonight we're venturing into the heart of the ancient Americas, to a time of feathered serpents, towering pyramids, and a sun that beat down with an almost personal intensity. We're going to explore in our usual, very slow, very sleepy way why you, with all your modern sensibilities and perhaps a slight aversion to relentless backbreaking labor under a truly unforgiving star, probably wouldn't last a single solitary day as an Aztec salt harvester on the shimmering, scorching shores of Lake Texcoco. Imagine, if you will, a world without sunscreen, without sunglasses, without even a decent wide brimmed hat, where your entire existence revolves around wresting precious white crystals from the saline earth hour after blistering hour. It's a life of stark simplicity, incredible endurance, and a level of sun exposure that would make a modern dermatologist weep. Now, a little reality check for you. Your chances of surviving this particular historical deep dive without succumbing to severe dehydration, a spectacular case of sunstroke, or simply developing an overwhelming urge to hide under the nearest available cactus. If you could even find one, are, let's be frank, astronomically small. This was not a gentle pastime. This was a daily battle against the elements for a vital but hard won commodity. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as always, I'd love to hear where you're joining me from and what time it is in your corner of the world. So please drop that in the comments below. Now dim the lights, maybe. Turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stir in the pre-dawn darkness, a darkness that is cool, almost chilly, a deceptive prelude to the fiery ordeal that awaits. The rough fibers of your patate, the woven reed mat that serves as your bed, scratch faintly against your skin. Above you, the low roof of your small one-room dwelling, perhaps made of sun-dried adobe bricks or wattle and daub with a thatched covering, is an unseen but familiar presence, trapping the night's accumulated coolness for a few more precious moments. There are no windows to speak of, only a low doorway, covered by a hanging mat, and perhaps a few small ventilation slits high in the walls that do little to pierce the profound blackness of these hours before sunrise. The air smells earthy of damp soil, from the floor of the lingering wood smoke from last night's small cooking fire, and even here, a faint, ever-present saline tang, a constant reminder of the lake and the salt that dictates your life. Your body aches. It is not the sharp, acute pain of a fresh injury, but a deep, familiar, grinding weariness that has settled into your muscles, into your joints, into the very marrow of your bones. It is the legacy of yesterday's toil under the blazing sun, and the day before that, and the day before that. An unbroken chain of relentless, sun-scorched labor. Each morning begins not with a feeling of refreshment, but with this dull, persistent ache, a physical manifestation of the day's harsh promise. Your alarm clock, if such a fanciful notion existed, would be this internal chorus of protesting muscles, or perhaps the first distant, mournful cry of a marsh bird out on the vast, still dark expanse of Lake Texcoco. You lie there for a few moments longer, clinging to the last vestiges of sleep, to the fleeting illusion of rest. But the day will not be denied. Already you can sense more than see a subtle shift in the quality of the darkness outside the doorway, a fractional lessening of its absolute intensity. The pre-dawn chill seems to intensify a final cold caress before the sun god Tonatiuh begins his fiery ascent. You know with a certainty, born of countless repetitions, that once he clears the distant eastern mountains, his gaze will be relentless, his heat unforgiving, transforming the shimmering salt flats into a vast baking griddle. Welcome to another glorious day of what could only be described as extreme solar radiation exposure, combined with advanced saline exfoliation therapy. With a groan that is part physical discomfort, part mental anguish, you push aside the coarse woven blanket, if you possess such a luxury, and swing your legs over the side of your mat. Your bare feet meet the cool, slightly damp earth of the floor. You sit there for a moment, your head heavy, your thoughts still thick and slow, like a toll that has been left to cool for too long. The exact nature of daily life and the specific domestic arrangements for commoners in the more rural, specialized Aztec communities, such as those settlements dedicated almost exclusively to salt harvesting on the often inhospitable shores of Lake Texcoco, away from the grand ceremonial and urban centers like the magnificent Tenochtitlan, is still pieced together by archaeologists from often subtle settlement patterns. The analysis of household refuse pits, surviving ethno-historical accounts from the early colonial period, and careful ethnographic analogy with traditional salt-making communities in other regions. It was likely a life of stark simplicity, focused almost entirely on the demanding seasonal rhythms of salt production. You rise stiffly your joints, protesting with a series of small dry clicks and pops. In the dimness, you can just make out the familiar shapes of your meager household possessions, a few earthenware pots for water, and storing food, a grinding stone, the metate, and its handstone, the mano for preparing maize, perhaps a small crudely carved wooden idol of Huixtocihuatl, the goddess of salt and saltwater, tucked into a niche in the wall, to whom a silent, hopeful prayer for a productive or at least survivable day might be offered. Some Aztec beliefs held that dreams experienced in these last hours before dawn were particularly significant, carrying omens or messages from the gods. You try to recall any fragments from your own recent slumber, but all that comes to mind is a vague, unsettling image of an endlessly shimmering white expanse under a mercilessly burning sky. Less a prophecy, perhaps, and more a fairly accurate preview of your upcoming workday. Your morning ablutions are brief and rudimentary, a splash of cool water from a clay jar onto your face, a quick rinse of your mouth. There are no mirrors, no elaborate grooming rituals. You don simple coarsework clothes, a maxtlatl or loincloth made of rough maguey fiber or woven cotton, if you are slightly more prosperous, and perhaps in this pre-dawn chill, a simple sleeveless tilmatli, a short cloak or mantle, also of coarse fiber tied over one shoulder. This attire offers minimal protection from the sun you will soon face, but it allows for freedom of movement, and anything more substantial would be an unbearable torment in the heat to come. A few other members of your household, if you have one, might be stirring now, their movements equally slow and reluctant. Perhaps the faint rhythmic sound of someone beginning the day's endless task of grinding maize on the metate can be heard from a neighboring dwelling, a gritty scraping sound that is one of the fundamental percussions of life in this land. You might exchange a few quiet, perfunctory words, or perhaps just a shared glance of weary understanding. There is little energy for extensive conversation before the sun has even shown its face. The recent tribute demands from the regional Calpixqui, the stern-faced Aztec tax collector and overseer appointed by the powers in Tenochtitlan, have been heavier than usual. The empire, in its constant expansion and its insatiable need for resources to fuel its wars, its monumental building projects, and its elaborate religious ceremonies, always requires more maize, more cotton, more feathers, more jade, and of course, more salt. Salt, that precious white crystal, is not just a seasoning here. It is a vital preservative, a crucial trade commodity, and an essential element in many religious rituals. The pressure to produce to meet the quota is constant, a silent goad that drives you out onto the flats day after weary day. You find a small dry maize cake, a tlaxcali, left over from yesterday, perhaps its texture like coarse sandpaper, its taste bland and uninspiring. This, along with a gourd of water you will carry with you, will likely be your only sustenance until the day's brutal work is done. You chew it slowly, mechanically, washing it down with a sip of the cool, slightly brackish water from your storage jar. The pre-dawn chill is beginning to dissipate, now replaced by a still, expectant quality in the air. The eastern sky, visible through your open doorway, is no longer a uniform black, but a deep bruised purple, with the faintest hint of a pale, almost invisible gray along the jagged silhouette of the distant mountains. It is time to go. You take a deep breath, a small, unconscious bracing for the inevitable, and prepare to step out from the relative coolness of your dwelling into the waiting, watchful stillness of the pre-dawn world, and towards the shimmering, salty promise and the sun-baked torment of the lakeshore. You step out from the cool, earthy darkness of your dwelling into the still pre-dawn air of the sleeping world. The coolness is more pronounced out here, carrying a damp, almost metallic tang that speaks of the vast, unseen expanse of Lake Texcoco, lying somewhere ahead in the gloom. The sky above is no longer the impenetrable black of deepest night. A subtle transformation is underway. The eastern horizon, a jagged silhouette of distant, unseen mountains, is now a deep, bruised indigo, and directly overhead the last few most tenacious stars still glitter with a cold, remote brilliance, though their reign is clearly drawing to a close. Your morning commute, you reflect with a sigh that mists faintly in the chilly air, involves no crowded causeways or jostling market throngs, just the occasional startled nightjar, the silent companionship of your own shadow, once the light permits it to exist, and the ever-present soul-deep anticipation of another delightful day, spent impersonating a slowly desiccating salted fish. Your bare feet, toughened by years of treading this same path, find the familiar, cool, packed earth of the narrow track that winds its way from your small cluster of dwellings towards the salt pans. The ground is still damp from the night's dew, and the sensation is almost pleasant. For a few brief moments, a fleeting respite, before the sun turns this same earth into a baking heat, radiating griddle. You walk with a slow, measured gait, your body still stiff and protesting from yesterday's labors, each footfall a soft, almost inaudible scuff in the profound stillness. There is no need for haste. The sun, that relentless overseer, has not yet risen, and the salt, that patient white treasure, will still be there, waiting. The landscape around you, as it slowly, reluctantly begins to reveal itself in the growing pre dawn twilight, is one of stark, austere beauty, or perhaps just stark austerity, depending on your current level of philosophical detachment. Low, scrubby bushes, their leaves small and leathery, to conserve precious moisture, dot the otherwise barren, alkaline soil. Hardy grasses the color of old straw cling to life in stubborn patches. Perhaps a few spiny cacti stand like silent, multi armed sentinels, their forms still mostly lost in shadow. This is not the lush, vibrant green of the Chinampas, those famed floating gardens closer to the heart of the great city of Tenochtitlan. This is the marginal land, the saline frontier, where only the toughest, most resilient life, including apparently Aztec salt harvesters, can eke out an existence. The local scenery you've often thought could be best described as 50 shades of dun with occasional exciting highlights of slightly paler, more salt encrusted dun. As you walk, other shadowy figures begin to emerge from nearby dwellings, joining the silent procession towards the lake. There are no cheerful greetings, no boisterous calls, just the soft scuff of bare feet on the earth, the occasional muffled cough, the faint rustle of coarse garments. A shared unspoken understanding hangs in the cool air, an understanding of the hard day ahead of the meager rewards of the relentless cycle of sun and salt and toil, the precise routes and typical daily travel distances for specialized Aztec laborers such as yourself, journeying between your often modest residential settlements and your designated work sites on the expansive, shimmering shores of Lake Texcoco, and exactly how these daily commutes impacted your overall work life balance, your energy expenditure, and your general level of morning cheerfulness are often estimated by diligent archaeologists. From careful analysis of ancient settlement patterns, soil composition, and sophisticated environmental reconstruction, rather than being explicitly detailed in surviving direct historical accounts, or illustrated in particularly inspiring imperial codices titled The Glorious and Uplifting Daily Commute of the Average Salt Harvester. The air itself is changing. That faint saline tang you noticed earlier is growing stronger now, sharper, more assertive. It's the breath of the Great Lake, carried on the almost imperceptible pre-dawn breeze. A smell of salt, of minerals, of ancient drying mud, and of something else, something uniquely aquatic and faintly pungent. The sounds, too, are shifting. The chirping of nocturnal crickets and the rustle of unseen night creatures in the scrub are beginning to fade, replaced by the first tentative sleepy twitters of awakening birds. Perhaps you see a particular type of night blooming flower, its petals a ghostly white in the dimness, now slowly, delicately closing up as the first true hints of dawn approach its brief nocturnal glory over. There's a local belief whispered among the older women that these moonflowers capture the dream of the night, and to disturb one as it closes is to risk releasing a particularly mischievous or unsettling dream back into the waking world. You give them a wide berth. Your own waking reality is quite unsettling enough, thank you. Ahead of you, the land begins to flatten out, to stretch away into a vast, featureless expanse. This is the edge of the ancient lake bed, the salt flats proper. In the growing pearly gray light, you can begin to see the shimmer of salt deposits on the cracked dry earth, like a faint ghostly frost. The great Lake Texcoco itself, a shallow saline giant that dominates this high valley, is still mostly a dark, brooding presence in the distance, its waters perhaps reflecting the first pale colors of the eastern sky. The water levels of this lake system fluctuated dramatically between the dry season, when vast expanses of salt encrusted mudflats like these would be exposed and ripe for harvesting, and the rainy season, when the waters would swell, inundating these same areas and forcing the salt workers to employ different, more water based extraction techniques, or perhaps to seek alternative, if equally unappealing, forms of employment. It is currently the heart of the dry season, the time of most intense labor and most intense sun. You might also catch, if your settlement is geographically positioned to allow it, a very distant, almost dreamlike glimpse of the legendary city of Tenochtitlan. Far out in the lake, perhaps just the faintest suggestion of its towering temple pyramids, or the hazy lines of the great causeways that connected it to the mainland, a reminder of the vast, powerful empire that your humble, backbreaking labor helps to sustain. It seems another world, entirely from your current dusty, salty reality. You are nearing your destination now. The saline smell is strong, almost acrid, prickling at your nostrils. The ground underfoot is becoming crunchier, more crystalline. The other silent figures around you have begun to disperse slightly, each heading towards their own familiar section of the salt pans, their own allotted patch of saline earth from which to rest the day's tribute. This early morning walk, this slow, reluctant journey through the cool, quiet stillness of the dying night, is nature's way of giving you one last fleeting chance to wake up fully, to gather your thoughts, to brace your spirit before the sun appears over the mountains and begins its daily relentless attempt to actively cook you in your own brine. You reach the edge of the working area, a vast, flat, desolate expanse that shimmers faintly in the growing light. Your simple tools, your clay pots, your reed scrapers, your woven carrying basket lie perhaps where you left them yesterday evening, or are gathered at a small communal storage spot nearby, waiting. The air is still cool, almost sharp, in these last moments before the sun's fiery dominion begins. The vast flat expanse of the salt pans stretches before you, a pale ghostly landscape in the growing gray light of pre-dawn. The shimmering incrustations of salt on the cracked earth catch the faint illumination, giving the ground an almost ethereal, otherworldly sheen. Other figures, your fellow harvesters, are dotted sparsely across this desolate stage, each moving with a similar slow, resigned deliberateness towards their own familiar patch of saline toil. There's a profound quiet, broken only by the distant, mournful cry of a marsh bird, or the soft crunch of your own bare feet on the salt, stiffened ground. You reach the small, almost invisible mound of earth, or perhaps a weathered stone that marks the edge of your family's traditional working area, a patch of land assigned by custom and the weary consensus of the community. Here, nestled in a slight depression, or perhaps covered by a tattered piece of woven reed matting to protect them from the worst of the night's dew or any inquisitive nocturnal creatures, are your tools of toil. They are few, simple, and speak eloquently of a life lived in close, often harsh communion with the earth and its meager offerings. Your toolkit for wresting precious white crystals from this unforgiving land is not exactly a marvel of advanced Aztec engineering. It's more a testament to making do with what the earth provides, and a lot of very hard work. First, there are the clay pots, the kamatali. You have several of these of varying sizes, all made from coarse, unglazed earthenware. Their surface is a dull, earthy brown or a slightly reddish ochre, depending on the clay source. They are heavy even when empty, their walls thick. To withstand the repeated cycles of filling heating, if you are using a method that involves artificial evaporation over a fire. Though here on the sun-baked flats, nature often does the heavy lifting and the inevitable knocks and bumps of daily use. You run your hand over the rough, porous surface of the largest one, its familiar coolness, a fleeting comfort. Its rim might be slightly chipped, a small crack spider webbing near its base, a testament to a previous season's near disaster. Perhaps you have scratched a small personal mark into its side, a simple geometric design, or the crude outline of a water bird, a way to distinguish it from the nearly identical pots of your neighbors. This one, you might think with a flicker of almost superstitious affection, is your lucky pot, the one that seems to yield the purest, whitest salt, the one that has never yet broken under the strain. Or perhaps it's just the one that leaks the slowest. Then there are your scrapers or digging implements. No fine bronze or sharp obsidian blades for this kind of bulk work. Those are precious materials reserved for warriors, craftsmen of finer things, or perhaps the occasional highly significant ritual sacrifice. Your primary tool for gathering the salt-encrusted earth is likely a flattened, sharpened piece of sturdy wood, its edge hardened in a fire, or perhaps a large, robust clamshell, its edge naturally suited for scooping and scraping. Some harvesters might use a bundle of particularly tough reeds, bound tightly together, and their ends frayed or cut, to form a sort of rough, stiff brush or broom for sweeping the looser surface salt into piles. You pick up your chosen scraper. Let's say it's a well-worn wooden spade-like tool, its handle polished smooth by years of your own sweaty, calloused grip, its scraping edge blunted and slightly splintered. It feels familiar in your hand, an extension of your own arm, yet also a symbol of the back-aching labor to come. The user manual for this particular piece of equipment, if one existed, would probably be very short. Dig, scrape, repeat until back gives out. Try not to break it or yourself. Good luck. Next, you gather your woven baskets and mats. A larger, coarse basket, a cheeky whittle, probably woven from split reeds or tough maguey fibers, will be used for carrying the larger quantities of salty earth from the collection points to the leaching areas, or later for transporting the harvested salt itself. Its weave is rough, open enough to allow some drainage, but also prone to snagging your skin or leaving tiny, irritating splinters in your fingers. You also have a few smaller, more finely woven reed mats, the petlattle, which can be used for various purposes as a surface to lay out tools to kneel on, though the ground is often too damp or too sharp for that to be much of a comfort, or perhaps to create a tiny, almost entirely symbolic patch of shade for your water gourd during the brief midday respite. These woven items smell faintly of dried reeds of dust and of the lingering pervasive salt that has become a permanent part of their very fabric. The precise degree of specialization in tool manufacturing for common labor-intensive activities like this salt harvesting within the broader Aztec society versus the likelihood of individual or household level production and basic maintenance of these rudimentary implements from readily available local materials like claywood and plant fibers. is something that archaeologists and ethnohistorians continue to infer from studying the distribution of surviving material culture. The standardization, or often lack thereof, of such tools across different archaeological sites and comparisons with traditional craft practices in later periods. For you, these are not mass produced items. They are the products of your own hands or those of your family or immediate community, each one unique, imperfect, and bearing the marks of long, hard use. They have clearly seen better days, and possibly you reflect with a grim internal chuckle, they have also seen significantly better centuries. You arrange your meager collection of tools beside the patch of salt encrusted earth you intend to work first. The clay pots are set out ready to receive the brine. The scraper leans against one, its worn edge glinting faintly in the growing gray light. The basket sits waiting, an empty woven maw. There is a certain stark, almost brutal simplicity to this array. It is a clear, uncompromising statement of the day's purpose to wrest a meager existence from this harsh saline landscape using nothing but these primitive implements and the strength of your own body. As you make these final preparations, as you run a calloused thumb over the chipped rim of your favorite pot, or test the strength of a basket handle, you feel it. A subtle shift in the air, a change in the quality of the light that is no longer just a lessening of darkness, but the first true announcement of the sun's imminent arrival. You glance towards the eastern mountains, and there it is, a tiny, almost imperceptible sliver of incandescent orange, just peeking over the highest, most distant, jagged peak. It is impossibly bright even at this distance, even as a mere sliver. It sends a chill of a different kind down your spine, a chill of anticipation, of resignation, of the certain knowledge that the brief, cool respite of the pre-dawn is now officially over. Your real overseer, the one whose gaze is inescapable and whose demands are absolute, is clocking in for its shift. The day, with all its sun-baked, salt-encrusted, back-breaking glory, is about to begin in earnest. That first sliver of incandescent orange, which had peeked so tentatively over the distant, jagged line of the eastern mountains, does not remain a modest herald for long. It swells with an almost alarming rapidity, a molten bubble expanding at the edge of the world, pushing back the deep indigos and soft grays of the pre-dawn sky with an unstoppable, imperious force. The stars, which only moments ago seemed like eternal diamond-hard fixtures, now fade and vanish one by one, like shy guests retreating before the arrival of a particularly boisterous and overbearing host. The sun isn't just rising, it's making a grand theatrical entrance. A very loud, very bright, and unmistakably, you are all going to be thoroughly baked today and you will like it kind of entrance. Within moments, the entire fiery disk of Tonatiuh, the sun god, in all his blazing, awesome glory, clears the mountain peaks. For a breathtaking instant, his light floods the high valley, transforming the landscape from a realm of cool, muted shadows into one of stark, brilliant clarity and rapidly escalating heat. The cool, damp air of the pre-dawn vanishes as if it were a fleeting dream, instantly replaced by a dry, almost palpable warmth that promises to intensify with every passing moment. Good morning, sunshine, and by good morning, you understand this to be the universe's less than subtle way of saying, prepare for the relentless application of the solar death ray for the next several hours. The effect on the salt flats is immediate and dramatic. The vast, pale expanse, which had shimmered with a ghostly, ethereal light just moments before, now explodes into a dazzling, almost blinding whiteness. Every tiny salt crystal on the cracked earth, every ripple in the distant shallow waters of Lake Texcoco catches the fierce new light and hurls it back at your unprepared eyes with a million tiny stabbing points of brilliance. You instinctively squint, raising a hand to shield your vision, but it offers little protection against this sudden, overwhelming glare. The long, attenuated shadows of the pre-dawn shrink with astonishing speed, racing back towards their owners as if terrified of the sun's fierce gaze, until soon there is almost no shadow at all, no respite, no place to hide from the rapidly intensifying onslaught. You can feel the heat on your skin, a sudden prickling wave that chases away the last vestiges of the night's chill, and begins almost immediately to draw the first beads of sweat to your brow. The rough, sun-baked earth beneath your bare feet, which had been cool and almost pleasant, is already beginning to warm, promising to become an unbearable griddle by midday. The air itself seems to shimmer, a visible heat haze, rising from the salt-encrusted ground, distorting the distant outlines of the scrubby bushes and your fellow harvesters, who are now like you beginning to stir themselves for the day's inevitable toil. The extent to which ancient Mesoamerican cosmology, particularly the complex and often rather demanding veneration of the sun, god known to the Aztecs as Tonatiuh, he whose journey across the sky required constant nourishment, often through elaborate and sometimes rather grim ritual offerings, to ensure the continued existence of the world, directly influenced the daily work schedules, the perceived unavoidable hardships, and the stoic attitudes towards intense, prolonged sun exposure among common laborers such as yourself is a multifaceted topic explored by ethnohistorians and archaeologists through the study of both grand religious iconography, sacred calendars, and the more subtle interpretations of everyday labor practices and deeply ingrained societal structures. For you, however, the theology is less pressing than the immediate physical reality. The sun is up, it is very, very bright, and it is already getting very, very hot. Perhaps there is a particular type of desert lark, a small dun-colored bird that nests amongst the saline scrub that always, without fail, bursts into a surprisingly loud and intricate trilling song at the precise exact moment the sun's full disk clears the horizon. Its melody, sharp and clear in the suddenly bright air, is both beautiful in its own way and a rather stark, almost mocking signal that the brief, cool interlude of night is well and truly over, and the real sun-drenched, back-breaking work of your day must now commence without further delay or procrastination. Or maybe there's a local belief passed down through your family that the very first rays of the sun carry a special kind of energy. Some say a blessing for a bountiful harvest, if the light is clear and golden. Others whisper it might be a warning of a particularly arduous day, if the light is filtered through a reddish haze or ominous-looking clouds. Today the light is just overwhelmingly, uncompromisingly bright. The world around you is now fully, starkly illuminated. The distant volcanic peaks that ring the Valley of Mexico stand out in sharp purple-gray relief against the rapidly paling blue of the sky. The vast, shallow expanse of Lake Texcoco shimmers under the sun, its surface reflecting the light with a glare that forces you to look away. The salt pans themselves are a seemingly endless vista of cracked earth, crystalline deposits, and the scattered rudimentary tools of your trade. There is no softness here, no gentle green, no shady groves. It is a landscape stripped bare, baked by the sun, and dedicated to the slow, patient extraction of its white, salty treasure. This is the point in any sensible creature's morning routine, where it would be diligently seeking out a cool patch of shade, a dark burrow, or at the very least, a very large, opaque leaf. Unfortunately, shade is a largely mythical concept in this particular career path, and large opaque leaves are in notoriously short supply on the salt flats. The initial almost violent shock of the sunrise begins to subside, replaced by a growing steady and deeply oppressive heat. The air, which just moments ago was cool and carried the damp scents of the night, now begins to smell of baked earth, of hot stone, and of the sharp mineral tang of sun-drenched salt. You can feel the sweat starting to prickle on your scalp, beneath your coarse hair, on your back beneath your simple loincloth or tunic. The day has barely begun, and already the sun is asserting its absolute, unwavering authority. There will be no escape from its gaze, no respite from its heat, for many, many hours to come. You take one last deep breath of the relatively cooler air that still lingers close to the ground, then reluctantly pick up your primary tool, your worn wooden scraper, or perhaps a large, sturdy clamshell. Its surface, which was cool to the touch just minutes ago, already feels faintly warm. The time for contemplation, for sleepy reluctance, for appreciating the subtle shifts of pre-dawn light is over. The sun is up. The salt awaits. And your long, hot, thirsty day as an Aztec salt harvester has in all its blazing, unforgiving glory officially begun. The sun, now clear of the distant mountain peaks, ascends with a determined, almost predatory swiftness, its fiery gaze already beginning to transform the cool gray salt flats into a shimmering, heat-radiating expanse of white. The brief, deceptive coolness of the pre-dawn is a forgotten memory replaced by a rapidly intensifying warmth that prickles at your exposed skin and promises a day of relentless baking heat. There is no shade here, no gentle breeze offering respite, only the vast open sky above and the glaring, salt-encrusted earth below. You take another deep, steadying breath, the air already tasting dry and slightly metallic, and bend to your task. The real work, the back-aching, sun-scorched labor of an Aztec salt harvester begins now. Your chosen tool, whether it's that worn wooden scraper with its splintery handle, or the large sturdy clamshell you've carefully sharpened against a rough stone, feels heavy and awkward in your hand, even before you've begun. You select a patch of earth before you, an area where the surface shows a promising whitish efflorescence, that telltale powdery bloom that indicates a good concentration of salt crystals just beneath the hard-baked crust. Some older, more experienced harvesters claim they can tell the quality of the salt by the precise pattern of these surface crystals or by the way the ground sounds when tapped with a tool, a certain hollow resonance supposedly indicating a rich deposit. You just hope for the best. With a grunt, you drive the edge of your scraper into the sun-baked crust. It resists the earth hard and unyielding, as if reluctant to give up its hidden treasure. You put your weight into it, your shoulder and back muscles tensing, and with a jarring scraping sound, the crust breaks. A small cloud of fine grayish-white dust, sharp and salty, rises into the still air, stinging your nostrils, making you cough. This is less like gentle harvesting and more like aggressively and rather sweatily persuading the very ground beneath your feet to relinquish its salty, crystalline secrets. Welcome to your official job title: Artisanal Earth Relocation Specialist, Subdepartment of Advanced Dehydration and Chronic Lower Back Discomfort. You begin the rhythm of the work scrape lift, discard the larger, less salty clods of surface dirt, then scrape again deeper this time into the richer, more concentrated layer of saline earth beneath. It's a repetitive, monotonous motion, bending low, your back already beginning to protest, your arms and shoulders straining with each pass of the tool. The sun, your personal, overly enthusiastic, and entirely unwelcome work supervisor, climbs higher, its rays beating down on your unprotected head and shoulders with increasing ferocity. Sweat begins to trickle down your temples, stinging your eyes and carving salty little pathways through the fine dust that is already clinging to your skin. The salty earth itself is a curious substance. Sometimes it comes away in dry, crumbly flakes. Other times it's a heavier, damp, almost clay-like consistency, depending on the proximity to the underlying water table of the lake or the recentness of any freakish out-of-season rainfall. It's gritty, abrasive, and it gets everywhere. Under your fingernails, into the creases of your skin, into your eyes, your mouth, your hair. By midday, you will feel as though you are less a human being and more a walking, vaguely person-shaped pillar of salt and dust. The exact tools and the precise nuanced techniques employed by Aztec salt harvesters to efficiently remove and initially process the saline earth from these vast sun-baked flats of Lake Texcoco, and the estimated almost certainly considerable physical toll such repetitive, often ergonomically challenging and strenuous labor inevitably took on their bodies, over many years are meticulously reconstructed by archaeologists and ethnohistorians. They delve into this past through the often scant surviving tool remains found at ancient production sites, through careful analysis of soil strata and salt chemistry, and by studying traditional pre-industrial salt-making practices that have persisted in similar arid saline environments in the region well into later centuries, seeking echoes of ancient methods. You, however, are not an archaeologist. You are simply engaged in the rather less glamorous and significantly more sweaty practical application. You work steadily trying to find a rhythm that is sustainable, if not comfortable. Scrape, lift, pile. Scrape, lift, pile. The small mound of collected salty earth beside you grows with an agonizing slowness. Each basketful, when you eventually pause to transfer your growing hoard, will represent a significant investment of energy and discomfort. This saltistatal in your Nahuatl tongue is a vital commodity for the vast Aztec Empire. It is not merely a seasoning to make the bland staple of maize a little more palatable. It is essential for preserving fish and meat, crucial for certain religious ceremonies and offerings to the gods, and a significant item of tribute that communities like yours, specializing in its production, must render unto the great city of Tenochtitlan, the heart of the Triple Alliance. Different areas around the sprawling Lake Texcoco were known to produce salt of varying qualities and even slightly different tastes, depending on the specific mineral composition of the local soils and waters. Some finer, whiter salt was highly prized by the nobility and the priesthood for its purity, while coarser, perhaps slightly grayish or brownish, salt was destined for more common everyday use or for preserving less delicate foodstuffs. You hope the earth you are currently torturing will yield a respectable grade. There might be a particular technique passed down from your parents or the older members of your community for scraping most effectively. Perhaps a certain angle at which to hold your tool, a specific way to read the subtle color variations in the soil that indicate the richest deposits, or even a near silent, almost ritualistic pattern of movement, always working in a line that faces a certain sacred mountain peak, or away from the direction of the prevailing dust carrying wind. A practice believed to maximize the salt yield, or perhaps to appease the earth spirits whose domain you are disturbing. Or perhaps you simply scrape wherever looks promising and hope for the best. A small iridescent beetle disturbed from its subterranean slumbers by your energetic excavations scurries frantically across the freshly turned earth, its tiny legs a blur of motion as it seeks new cover. You watch it for a moment, a brief, insignificant distraction in the vast, sun drenched emptiness. Even the insects here seem toughened, adapted to this harsh, saline world. The sun climbs higher still. The initial warmth has now become a definite pressing heat. The glare from the white, salt encrusted ground is intense, making your eyes ache. You pause for a moment, straightening your protesting back, wiping a forearm across your sweaty brow, leaving a muddy smear. You take a precious small sip from your water gourd, the liquid already feeling tepid and unsatisfying. Around you, other figures are similarly engaged, bent silhouettes scattered across the shimmering flats, each one a small solitary island of toil in this vast baking wilderness. The silence is broken only by the rhythmic scrape of their tools, the occasional grunt of effort, and the ever-present, almost inaudible sigh of the hot, dry air moving across the desolate plain. Your small pile of salty earth, the fruit of your initial labors, now seems substantial enough to warrant the next stage of the process. It doesn't look like much, really. Just a mound of dry, grayish-brown dirt, flecked with tiny, glittering salt crystals. But within this humble pile lies the potential for that precious, life-sustaining white gold. You lay down your scraper for a moment, your hands already feeling raw and gritty, and eye the pile with a mixture of weary satisfaction and a renewed sense of the immense effort that still lies ahead. The first battle of the day has been fought, and a small, dusty victory achieved. You straighten up from your labors, your back protesting with a series of dull, resentful aches, and survey the small, dusty mound of salt-encrusted earth you have managed to scrape together. It doesn't look like much. Certainly not enough to impress the stern-faced Calpixqui when tribute day arrives, but it is a beginning. This humble pile of dirt, however, is not yet salt. It is merely the raw material, the promise of salt, locked within its gritty, earthen embrace. The next stage of this ancient alchemical process is to persuade the salt to leave its earthy prison and dissolve into a more cooperative liquid form, the brine. This is the leaching ritual, a slow, patient, and utterly crucial step that requires a careful hand and an almost reverent respect for your most precious resource here on these arid flats, fresh water. You turn to your collection of clay pots. For this task, You select one of your larger, wider mouthed vessels, perhaps one that has a small, pre drilled hole near its base, or one whose porous nature you know from experience allows for a slow, steady seepage. If it doesn't have a hole, you might carefully create a drainage point by propping it at a slight angle or by using a specific arrangement of smaller stones within its base. The precise construction details of the typically small-scale Aztec salt leaching apparatus, particularly for this kind of household level or individual worker production, that likely occurred away from any larger, perhaps more sophisticated state-controlled facilities, and the overall efficiency of their often quite simple filtration methods, which relied heavily on locally sourced organic materials, are areas where direct archaeological evidence is often suggestive rather than truly definitive, relying partly on the interpretation of surviving ceramic forms and careful ethnographic parallels drawn from traditional salt-making practices in similar environments. Inside this leaching pot, you create a filter. First, a layer of small, clean pebbles or coarse gravel at the very bottom to allow the brine to collect and drain. Then, upon this, you carefully arrange a thick mat of woven reeds or perhaps a bundle of specific long grasses, known for their fibrous strength and their ability to resist becoming too quickly clogged with fine silt. Some salt harvesters might even possess a precious, well-worn piece of coarse cotton cloth. Ishkatl reserved for this purpose, though such a material is more valuable and might be used sparingly. The aim is to create a barrier that will hold back the earth while allowing the salt-laden water to trickle through. You ensure this filter layer is snug with no obvious gaps. With your leaching pot prepared, you begin the laborious task of transferring your pile of salty earth into it, handful by careful handful, or perhaps using your wooden scraper to gently push it in. You don't pack it down too tightly. You want the water to be able to percolate through it evenly. Once the pot is filled to a suitable level, leaving some space at the top, you position another slightly smaller clean clay pot directly beneath the drainage hole or the lowest point of your leaching vessel, ready to catch the precious emerging brine. Now for the water. You reach for your zikali, the dried gourd that serves as your water carrier, which you filled earlier from the communal well, or a carefully hoarded store. Every drop is precious. Water, especially fresh water suitable for drinking or for this leaching process, is a constant concern in these saline environments surrounding the Great Lake Texcoco. Its careful management, its conservation, its ritual importance is woven into the very fabric of your daily existence. Waste not want, not especially when want not involves the back-breaking labor of hauling water for any significant distance under the ever-watchful, ever-thirsty gaze of Tonatiuh, the sun god. You take the gourd and begin to pour the water slowly, carefully over the surface of the salty earth in the leaching pot. Not too much at once. You want it to seep down gradually, to have time to dissolve the salt crystals it encounters on its journey. You watch as the cool water darkens the dry, grayish earth, disappearing into its depths with a soft, thirsty sigh. It's like you're making artisanal mud water. You might reflect with a flicker of internal weary humor, but like the really, really valuable life-sustaining kind of mud water. For a few moments, nothing happens. You wait patiently, your eyes fixed on the underside of the leaching pot. The sun is climbing higher now, its heat beginning to press down with a more insistent weight. The air is still, and the silence is broken only by the distant, almost imperceptible sounds of other harvesters engaged in similar quiet, patient rituals across the flats. Then you see it, a single hesitant droplet of water, dark and slightly muddy, at first appearing at the drainage hole. It swells, trembles for a second, and then falls with a soft plink into the clean collection pot below. Another follows, then another, the drips becoming a slow, steady trickle. You watch this process with a focused intensity. The first few trickles of brine might indeed be a little cloudy, carrying some fine silt that has managed to bypass your filter. But soon, the liquid should begin to run clear, taking on a slightly oily, almost viscous quality, a sign that it is now heavily saturated with dissolved salt. You might even risk touching a finger to a drop that has splashed onto the side of the pot and tasting it. An instant, overwhelming burst of pure, concentrated saltiness that makes your lips pucker and your already parched throat constrict. Yes, this is the good stuff. This is the liquid heart of the salt. Some believe that during this crucial leaching process, it is important to maintain a respectful silence, or perhaps to offer a quiet prayer or a simple chant to Huixtocihuatl, the ancient goddess of salt and salt water, she who first taught mortals the art of its extraction. Or maybe a plea to Chalchutlacu, she of the jade skirt, the powerful goddess of lakes, rivers, and all running waters, asking for her blessing on this transformation. A specific type of long, smooth rivergrass, if used as part of the filter, might be thought to not only purify the brine, but also to imbue it with some of its own resilient, life giving spirit. These are the small, quiet beliefs that underpin the daily toil, transforming it from mere labor into a kind of sacred, if arduous, craft. You continue to add water slowly to the top of the leaching pot, always careful not to add too much too quickly, ensuring a steady, patient percolation. The level of brine in the collection pot below rises with an almost imperceptible slowness. This is not a process that can be rushed. It requires time, it requires care, it requires a deep understanding of the way water and earth and salt interact. It's the original slow drip filtration method you suppose only instead of resulting in a delightful caffeinated morning beverage to be enjoyed at leisure, your end product is a highly concentrated saline solution and the precursor to another several hours of extremely hot, sweaty, and back-breaking labor under a vengeful pre-Columbian sun god. As the sun climbs higher still, its heat beginning to beat down with a truly noticeable ferocity, you complete the leaching for this first batch of salty earth. The collection pot now holds a respectable quantity of dark, potent brine. You carefully set aside the now leached damp earth. It will be discarded, its salty treasure given up. You lift the precious pot of brine, its weight surprisingly significant, and carry it a short distance to where you will set up your evaporation pans, ready for the next, and perhaps most sun-dependent stage of this ancient alchemy. The air shimmers with heat, and the day is truly relentlessly beginning. The sun climbs relentlessly, an incandescent eye in the vast, cloudless expanse of the cerulean sky, reaching its zenith, that precise, unforgiving moment known to your people as Nepantla Tonatiuh, the sun in its very middle, its apex of power. And with this celestial milestone comes a fury of heat that is difficult to comprehend, a palpable, oppressive wave that seems to suck the very moisture from the air from the earth, and most alarmingly, from your own increasingly desiccated body. The brief, almost tolerable warmth of the early morning is now a distant, cherished memory, replaced by a full-blown, relentless solar assault. The sun isn't just shining with a cheerful disposition, it's actively and with considerable enthusiasm trying to set a new world record for most aggressive and sustained application of solar radiation delivered to a single, unsuspecting, and woefully under-equipped Aztec salt harvester. There is no shade, none. Not a tree, not a significant rock, not even a particularly large or obliging cactus offers any respite on these vast, open, shimmering salt flats. You are utterly exposed, a tiny solitary figure in an immense baking wilderness of white and pale brown, with the fiery eye of Tonatiuh glaring down from directly overhead, eliminating even the meager comfort of your own shadow. Your shadow now huddles small and insignificant, directly beneath your feet, as if it too is trying to escape the merciless glare. Shade. What is this mythical concept of shade you vaguely recall from tales of more fortunate lands with things like trees or roofs? Here it is a forgotten word, a legend whispered by those who have clearly never had the pleasure of spending a midday under the full, unblinking gaze of an Aztec sun god at the height of his power. The heat radiates upwards from the salt-encrusted earth, a tangible, shimmering wave that meets the heat beating down from the sky, sandwiching you in an oven of your own making. The ground itself is now too hot to touch for more than a fleeting second, and you shift your bare feet constantly, trying to find a slightly less searing patch, a futile dance of discomfort. The air you breathe is hot and dry, like inhaling directly from a furnace, and it seems to offer no relief, no moisture, only a further desiccating rasp in your already parched throat. You can feel the sweat, which had been a mere trickle earlier, now pouring from you, soaking your simple loincloth, running in stinging rivulets into your eyes, and evaporating almost instantly from your skin, leaving behind a fine, gritty residue of salt and dust. The glare is blinding. The sun reflects off the endless expanse of white salt crystals with an intensity that makes your eyes ache and water, despite your constant weary squinting. The world around you dissolves into a shimmering, wavering haze, where distant objects, the hazy line of the lake shore, the far-off volcanic peaks, even your fellow harvesters, toiling a short distance away, seem to ripple and float as if viewed through moving water. It's a disorienting, almost hallucinatory landscape, where reality itself seems to bend and warp under the sheer oppressive weight of the heat and light. You're pretty sure you could fry a quail egg on the surface of that large flat stone over there. If only you possessed a quail egg, a modicum of cooking fat, and weren't slightly more concerned about your own brain spontaneously poaching inside your skull. Any attempt at continued labor, such as tending to your slowly evaporating brine or scraping more salty earth, becomes an act of supreme, almost impossible effort. Your movements are slow, leaden your muscles screaming in protest with every bend, every lift. Your head throbs with a dull, persistent ache. A wave of dizziness might occasionally wash over you, making the shimmering landscape tilt and sway alarmingly, forcing you to pause, to brace yourself against a clay pot, to fight for equilibrium. The specific physiological adaptations or ingrained behavioral coping mechanisms employed by ancient Aztec laborers to routinely endure such prolonged periods of exposure to extreme solar radiation and desiccating heat in these open, unforgiving environments, beyond the obvious and rather inadequate strategy of wearing minimal loincloths or simple tunics and relying on whatever meager hydration they could carry with them, are not extensively detailed in the primary codices or early colonial accounts. Thus, the true extent of their resilience and their specific strategies for survival remain a subject of ongoing physio-anthropological speculation, and sometimes rather odd comparative study with modern populations who inhabit similarly challenging desert or saline climates, though usually with the benefit of slightly more advanced sun protection technology than a damp rag occasionally tied around the forehead. The only creatures that seem to truly thrive in this midday inferno are the lizards. You might see a small gray whip-tailed lizard, its skin perfectly camouflaged against the salt-caked earth, dart out from beneath a clump of dried reeds. Pause for a moment with its head cocked, its tiny black eyes glittering, and then bask, seemingly unconcerned, on a sun-drenched rock that would surely scorch your own unprotected skin. These small, scaly inhabitants of the flats are perfectly adapted to this brutal environment, masters of heat conservation and water retention. Unlike yourself, who currently feels like a slowly wilting, rapidly dehydrating, and distinctly out of place apology for a human being. There's a strongly held belief among your people that, at high noon, when Tonatiuh is at the very apex of his celestial journey, he is at his most powerful, his most watchful, his most demanding. His gaze penetrates everything. It is a time for reverence, for awe, but also a time when his fiery energy can be almost too much for mortal flesh to bear. Some say that to look directly at him at this hour is to invite blindness or madness, or at the very least a truly spectacular headache. You keep your gaze resolutely downcast, focused on the glaring earth, on your simple tools, on the shimmering slow evaporation in your clay pans, though even these reflected surfaces offer little respite for your aching eyes. The silence of the midday heat is profound, broken only by the faint, high-pitched buzzing of unseen insects that seem to revel in the furnace-like conditions, or the occasional dry rustle of wind through the sparse, desiccated scrub at the edge of the flats. Even the birds are silent, seeking what little shelter they can find. It is a silence that presses in on you, amplifying the thumping of your own heart, the rasp of your own breathing, the desperate silent scream of your body for water, for shade, for an end to this relentless solar torment. Your mouth is dry, your tongue feels thick and clumsy, and the taste of salt and dust is a constant, unwelcome presence. The world has been reduced to a simple, brutal equation: sun, salt, heat, and a thirst that is rapidly becoming an all-consuming obsession. The need for even the briefest respite, for a mouthful of that tepid water in your gourd and a bite of that dry, unsatisfying maize cake becomes an undeniable, urgent, and overwhelming imperative. The sun beats down with an almost personal malice, a vast, incandescent hammer pounding relentlessly upon the anvil of the salt flats. The shimmering heat haze dances and writhes above the cracked white earth, distorting the world into a wavering, dreamlike mirage. Every breath you take is like inhaling fire dry and scorching, offering no relief to your parched throat or burning lungs. Your body screams for shade, for water, for a cessation of this solar torment. But there's nowhere to hide, no escape from the omnipresent, all-consuming heat. The imperative to pause, however briefly, to take on some meager sustenance and a few precious sips of water becomes not just a desire, but an act of sheer survival. You scan the desolate expanse for a spot that might offer even the slightest, most pathetic illusion of respite. There are no trees, no sheltering rocks, not even a particularly tall clump of desiccated reeds. You finally settle for crouching low beside your largest clay pot, the one currently filled with the dark, potent brine you so laboriously leached earlier. Its curved earthenware side offers a sliver of shadow, no wider than your hand, a laughably inadequate shield against the sun's dominion. But it is at this moment the best you can do. It's the five-star executive lounge of the Salt Flats, offering premium views of endless desolation and a complimentary side of heat stroke. With slow, deliberate movements for every gesture, is now an effort you reach for the small woven pouch at your waist. From within, you retrieve your midday meal. It is not a feast. It is not even by any generous stretch of the imagination a particularly appetizing snack. It is a single small, rather forlorn-looking maize cake at Tlaxcali. It is flat, round, and hard, its surface a dull, dusty yellow-brown, perhaps slightly scorched in places from its baking on a hot comal, a clay griddle days ago. This is the staple, the uncomplaining, unyielding bedrock of your diet, the fuel that keeps the great Aztec Empire and its countless laboring souls like yourself slowly, incrementally moving forward. Maize in its myriad forms, as tortillas, as tamales, as atole, or as these incredibly durable, travel-ready flat cakes, was the sacred grain, the gift of the gods, the very substance of life. Right now, however, it looks less like a divine gift and more like a particularly uncooperative geological sample. You turn it over in your calloused, salt-caked fingers. It is dry, so dry, it feels as though it might crumble into dust at any moment yet. Paradoxically, it is also incredibly hard, almost like a piece of fired pottery. These cakes were made to last, to endure long journeys or periods of storage. Their low moisture content a deliberate defense against mold and spoilage in this often humid then baking climate. Some households had specific techniques for preparing these Tlaxcali for long keeping or for travel, perhaps involving a double baking process that rendered them nearly indestructible and also nearly inedible without significant preparation or very determined teeth. You break off a small piece. It snaps with a sharp, dry crack, showering your lap with tiny, gritty crumbs. You put the piece in your mouth. The texture is precisely as expected, coarse, sandy, and profoundly, almost aggressively bland. It sucks every last vestige of moisture from your already parched tongue, transforming into a thick, difficult to swallow paste. You chew slowly, methodically, your jaw, working with a weary determination. The taste is earthy, dusty, with a faint underlying sourness, if the maize flour was not perfectly fresh when it was ground on the metat. It's not so much a meal as a brief, rather crunchy interruption to your ongoing and increasingly desperate process of slow desiccation. You briefly entertain the fantasy of a modern convenience from some unimaginable future, perhaps a small, soft, cheese-filled bread roll, or a juicy piece of fruit. But such thoughts are dangerous, offering no solace, only a sharper awareness of your current, very dry, very gritty reality. Next, you reach for your water gourd, the cicali, which has been resting in the meager shade of your own body, an attempt to keep its contents from becoming actively boiling. The gourd itself is smooth and cool on its underside, but the water within when you unstopper it, the stopper perhaps a simple twist of reed or a carved wooden plug, and raise it to your lips, is tepid, almost warm, and carries the faint, slightly musty taste of the gourd, itself mingled with the ever-present flavor of salt that now seems to permeate everything in your world, including your own saliva. You take a small, precious sip, resisting the urge to gulp it all down in one desperate, ill-advised deluge. This water has to last. It is your lifeline. Each mouthful is measured, savored not for its taste, which is flat and unrefreshing, but for the life-giving moisture it represents. The coolness as it slides down your raw, parched throat is a fleeting, exquisite relief, a tiny oasis in the desert of your thirst. The actual daily caloric intake and precise nutritional balance available to Aztec commoners engaged in prolonged, heavy physical labor, particularly those individuals like yourself, working in specialized and often resource-scarce environments, such as these salt production flats, far removed from the more fertile agricultural heartlands of the Valley of Mexico, is a complex and often sobering reconstruction. It is derived by dedicated scholars from the detailed analysis of archaeological food remains found in middens and household contexts, from careful ethnographic comparisons with historical and modern traditional farming and laboring communities, from interpretations of often incomplete tribute records, listing foodstuffs, and sometimes even from the silent testimony of skeletal markers indicating diet disease and chronic nutritional stress. Suffice it to say, your current lunch of one slightly sad, geologically challenging maize biscuit and a refreshing gulp of lukewarm despair water probably wouldn't feature prominently in any modern athlete's high-performance dietary plan. You might try dipping a piece of the hard maize cake into your cupped hand, holding a little water just to soften it enough to make it marginally more chewable, a common practice that transforms it from a dental hazard into merely a very bland, slightly soggy pulp. As you eat, you observe the world around you. The sun is an unblinking, malevolent eye directly overhead. The salt flats shimmer and waver in the heat haze. Other harvesters are similarly paused, small, hunched figures, seeking what little solace they can find, their movements slow and economical. There is no conversation, no laughter, just a shared, silent endurance of the midday inferno. Some believe that one should not speak while eating this meager midday portion in the direct, unforgiving sun, as it might be seen as disrespectful to Tonadia, or perhaps it might simply invite ill luck or a swarm of particularly determined heat-induced flies. The brief, inadequate meal is over all too soon. The maize cake is gone, leaving a gritty residue in your mouth. The water gourd feels significantly lighter. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach has been momentarily quieted, but not truly satisfied. The profound thirst still claws at your throat. This was not a reprieve designed for pleasure or for genuine restoration. It was a minimal functional pause, a tiny offering to the body's most urgent demands, just enough to allow you to continue the brutal work that still lies ahead. With a sigh that is more a dry rasp than a release of air, you restopper your water gourd, brush the maize crumbs from your loincloth, and prepare to face the afternoon. The sun has not moved from its zenith. If anything, its heat feels even more intense, more personal, more determined to bake you into the very salt you're trying to harvest. You turn your gaze from the empty horizon back to your array of clay pots, particularly those shallow, wide ones, now holding the precious dark brine. The next stage of your labor awaits the long, patient, sun driven vigil of evaporation. The sun, a merciless, incandescent eye, suspended directly overhead in the vast, cloudless turquoise vault of the heavens, continues its relentless oppression. The brief, inadequate respite afforded by your meager midday meal of dry maize cake and tepid water is now a distant, almost mocking memory. The heat radiating from the salt-encrusted earth is a palpable force, shimmering invisible waves that distort the already bleak landscape into a wavering, hallucinatory panorama. Your skin feels tight parched and prickles with 1,000 tiny points of fiery irritation where the sun's rays beat down with undiminished ferocity. Yet the work must continue. The precious dark brine, so laboriously leached from the saline earth, now awaits its final sun-driven transformation into the white crystalline treasure that is your livelihood, your tribute, your burden. With painstaking care, you begin to pour the concentrated brine from your larger collection pots into the shallow, wide, purpose-made evaporation pans. These are typically crafted from smooth, fine clay, their interiors perhaps burnished to a slight sheen, their forms broad and low to maximize the surface area exposed to the sun's potent evaporative power. You arrange these pans in neat rows on a particularly flat and sun-drenched patch of the salt flats, each one a miniature briny lake reflecting the blinding sky. You handle each pot of brine as if it were liquid gold, for in truth its value in this arid, salt-dependent world is not far removed from that. Not a drop can be wasted. The liquid is dark, almost black in its concentration, and carries a sharp, clean, intensely salty aroma that now mingles with the smell of the baking earth and your own sun-baked skin. Once the pans are filled, your primary task becomes one of patient, watchful, and incredibly hot waiting. This is the world's slowest, hottest, and arguably least exciting magic show. Behold as I, the humble salt harvester, make water disappear. Eventually, probably. You sit, or rather crouch nearby, seeking what little almost imaginary shade might be offered by your own hunched form, or perhaps by propping up a spare woven mat on a couple of your taller leaching pots, creating a tiny stifling but fractionally less sun-blasted lean-to. There's nothing to do now but observe, to endure, and to try not to spontaneously combust. The sun beats down. The heat is a physical weight, pressing on your head, your shoulders, your very spirit. The air is so dry it seems to crackle. The silence is profound, broken only by the high-pitched, incessant, almost maddening buzz of unseen heat-loving insects, or perhaps the faint, dry rustle of a desiccated reed skittering across the flats in a momentary hot puff of wind. Your own breathing sounds loud and raspy in your ears. Your throat is a desert. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the transformation begins. You watch the surface of the dark brine in the shallow pans. The fierce sun draws the water upwards, an invisible tribute to the thirsty sky. The level of the liquid begins to drop millimeter by agonizing millimeter. As the water vanishes, the brine becomes even more concentrated, its color perhaps lightening slightly its surface, taking on an oily, almost metallic sheen. The salt crystals are forming with all the breakneck speed and thrilling urgency of a government committee meticulously deliberating on the official approved color of sand for royal hourglasses. Then the first true magic appears. Tiny, almost invisible needle like crystals begin to form at the very edges of the pans, where the brine is thinnest and the heat most intense. They glitter like miniature diamonds in the harsh sunlight. Gradually, these pioneer crystals grow, reaching out, joining with others, forming delicate feathery fronds, intricate star-like patterns, or sometimes just a granular opaque film across the surface. You might observe a particular almost flower-like crystalline formation emerging in one of your pans, a fleur de sal if you were a fancy European salt connoisseur of a later age, but to you it is simply a good sign. Perhaps an omen that Huixtocihuatl, the goddess of salt, is looking favorably upon your labors today. Some older harvesters hold the belief that one should not cast one's shadow over the evaporating pans for too long during this critical phase, as it might chill the process or disrupt the delicate balance, thereby angering the sun god Tonatiuh or offending the salt goddess herself. You try to remain still a silent, sweaty, and increasingly thirsty observer. The Aztecs, your people, produced different grades of salt, and the methods used during this evaporation stage could influence the final product. A slower, more carefully controlled evaporation, perhaps, with the pans slightly shaded during the very fiercest part of the day. Though shade is a rare commodity, here might yield finer, whiter, more delicate crystals, prized for seasoning the food of the nobility or for use in important religious offerings. A faster, more aggressive evaporation under the full fury of the sun, like the one you are currently supervising, tends to produce coarser, larger, perhaps slightly less pure crystals, suitable for general consumption for preserving fish and meat, or for trade with inland communities who lacked their own salt sources. The precise level of control that ancient Aztec salt makers could consistently achieve over the final crystal-sized texture and ultimate chemical purity of their product, primarily through manipulating these solar evaporation rates and carefully managing brine concentration in these open-air pans, especially given the often unpredictable variables of daily weather conditions. Gusting wind and the unavoidable settling of airborne dust and contaminants is a subject of ongoing experimental archaeology and detailed chemical analysis of any surviving ancient salt samples. You are basically a highly specialized and deeply underappreciated puddle supervisor, ensuring optimal puddle reduction and crystal formation. As more water evaporates, the layer of forming salt at the bottom of the pans thickens, becoming a solid white crust. The dark brine above it shrinks, leaving behind this growing treasure. The transformation is slow, yes, but it is also deeply fundamentally magical. From muddy earth and precious water, under the relentless gaze of the sun, these pure white crystals are born. It is an alchemy as old as the land itself. The heat, however, is becoming almost unbearable. Your head throbs, your vision swims. The taste of salt and dust is a permanent fixture in your parched mouth. Every movement is an effort. The sun seems to be burrowing into your very skull. The hours spent watching this water vanish, this slow crystallization, are a true test of endurance, a fiery crucible that burns away everything but the most essential, most stubborn core of your being. and as the last of the water finally surrenders to the sun, leaving behind a thick, damp, glistening bed of freshly formed salt crystals in your pans. Another, even more pressing internal process has reached its own critical point. Your body's desperate, screaming need for water. The last of the brine in your shallow clay pans finally shimmers, yields its watery ghost to the insatiable sun, and then is gone, leaving behind a fragile, glistening crust of pure, white salt crystals. It is a moment that should perhaps bring a sense of triumph, of accomplishment. You have coaxed treasure from the barren earth, transformed muddy water into precious life-sustaining Aristotle. But any flicker of professional pride is immediately comprehensively and brutally extinguished by a far more pressing, far more primal concern, a thirst so profound, so all-consuming, it feels as though every cell in your body is screaming out in a silent, desperate chorus for water. The hours spent under the direct, unblinking gaze of Tonatiuh, patiently watching the water vanish from your pans, have taken a terrible toll. The sun, that fiery overseer, has not only drawn the moisture from your brine, but has also been diligently, relentlessly drawing it from you. Your throat, which had merely been dry and scratchy before, now feels as though it has been personally scraped clean with coarse sand and then thoroughly lined with ancient desiccated parchment. Your tongue is a thick, clumsy, alien thing in your mouth, cleaving stubbornly to your palate, making even the simplest attempt to swallow an arduous, painful effort. Your lips are cracked, stinging, coated with a fine, gritty mixture of salt and dust. This isn't just being thirsty. This is an advanced postgraduate level course in profound existential dehydration, and you are unfortunately acing the practical exam. You reach for your water gourd, the zikali, with a hand that trembles slightly from a combination of heat exhaustion and an almost unbearable anticipation. The gourd feels alarmingly light. You unstopper it, your fingers fumbling with the simple reed plug, and tilt it towards your cracked lips. A few drops, then a thin, hesitant trickle of tepid gourd-flavored water emerges. So little, so pitifully, laughably inadequate to combat the raging inferno within you. Each drop is an agony of desire, a fleeting moment of coolness that only serves to highlight the vast parched desert of your throat. You try to sip it slowly to make it last, but the urge to gulp to pour the entire remaining contents down your burning gullet is almost overwhelming. Water, once a humble, readily available beverage, now the most precious, most elusive, most desperately coveted luxury item in your entire sun-baked universe. The precise daily water consumption requirements for individuals like yourself engaged in prolonged, strenuous physical labor in extremely arid, hot, and highly saline environments, such as these Lake Texcoco salt flats, and exactly how effectively these critical physiological needs could consistently be met day after day, given the inherent limitations of available freshwater sources, which were often distant or required considerable effort to access traditional water-carrying capacities of gourds or small ceramic vessels, and the significant additional sodium load inevitably ingested from your work. And likely your diet is a critical factor that continues to be carefully assessed by bioarchaeologists and historical ecologists when evaluating the overall health, the resilience, and the long-term sustainability of such specialized, environmentally challenging labor within the Aztec Empire. You, however, are not currently pondering the finer points of historical ecology. You are mostly just pondering whether it's possible to die from sheer unadulterated thirst while surrounded by literally acres of salt. The irony is not lost on you even in your current heat-addled state. Your head swims with a light dizzying faintness. The shimmering heat haze rising from the salt flats seems to intensify the world around you, taking on an even more unreal, wavering quality. Perhaps you even see it. A shimmering, illusory pool of cool, clear water. In the distance, a cruel mirage dancing at the edge of your vision, beckoning with a false promise of relief. There's a local belief, a story whispered by the older harvesters, that these visions are the work of mischievous earth spirits, or perhaps even a test from the gods themselves designed to lure the unwary or the desperate away from their tasks and into the desolate, waterless wastes. You blink hard, trying to dispel the illusion, focusing instead on the harsh, undeniable reality of the baked earth and the glittering, newly formed salt. You lick your dry, cracked lips, tasting only salt and dust. Your saliva, if you can produce any at all, is thick and ropey. Every movement is an effort. The sun continues its relentless assault, seeming to draw every last remaining molecule of moisture from your very being. You remember the cool, damp feel of the earth under your feet this morning in the pre-dawn darkness, and the memory is an almost unbearable torment. You think of the great Lake Texcoco itself, its vast expanse shimmering tantalizingly in the distance. But you know its waters are too brackish, too saline to offer any real solace. To drink deeply from it would only worsen your plight. Access to true fresh water was a constant critical concern for all communities in the Valley of Mexico, a concern reflected in the complex systems of canals and aqueducts that supplied the great city of Tenochtitlan, and in the profound reverence for Tlaloc, the powerful fanged god of rainstorms and all life-giving waters, to whom countless prayers and offerings were made especially during the long, unforgiving dry season. Right now, you would happily offer Tlaloc your entire, albeit meager, future salt harvest for just one deep, cool draft from a mountain spring. You might know of certain desert plants, perhaps a specific type of small barrel-like cactus that grows far from these immediate flats in the rockier, higher ground. Legend has it that if one is incredibly fortunate and possesses the precise, often jealously guarded knowledge of how to locate and safely prepare it, for many cacti are themselves toxic or filled with unpalatable alkaloids, it might yield a few precious if bitter drops of life-sustaining liquid. But such plants are rare, their bounty uncertain, and the journey to find them far too perilous in your current weakened state. It's a desperate thought quickly dismissed. Your world has shrunk to the single, overwhelming, agonizing sensation: thirst. It dominates your thoughts, colors, your perceptions, saps your will. The salt crystals in your pans, which only moments ago seemed like a magical, hard-won treasure, now appear almost mocking in their dry, crystalline perfection. You have created this substance, this essence of dryness, and in doing so, you have brought yourself to the very brink of desiccation. The irony is as sharp and bitter as the taste of salt on your cracked tongue. Yet, even through the fog of your thirst and the debilitating heat, a small, stubborn ember of duty, of ingrained habit remains. The salt is there. It has formed. It lies exposed on the pans, vulnerable to the wind which could scatter it or contaminate it with dust, and to the unrelenting sun, which, if left too long, might bake it into a solid, unmanageable cake. It must be harvested, and soon. This grim necessity, this knowledge that your labor is not yet done, provides a thin, reedy counterpoint to the overwhelming chorus of your body's screaming need for water. With a groan that is almost a prayer, you prepare to rise to force your protesting limbs into action once more, to gather your white crystalline prize, even as the fire of thirst consumes you from within. Every instinct in your parched, heat-ravaged body screams for water, for shade, for an end to this solar torment. The fire in your throat is a constant, agonizing presence, and your head throbs with a dull, persistent ache, a rhythm section to the high-pitched whine of the sun's oppressive symphony. Yet before you in those shallow clay pans lies the tangible result of the day's slow, sun-driven alchemy, a glistening white crust of newly formed salt crystals. It is your harvest, your tribute, your meager claim against the relentless indifference of this harsh saline landscape. It cannot be left here exposed to the whims of the wind or the further baking of the sun, which might soon turn it into a rock-hard, unmanageable cake. And so, with a groan that is swallowed by the vast, shimmering silence of the salt flats, you force your protesting limbs into motion once more. You kneel beside the first evaporation pan, the baked earth beneath your knees, radiating a fierce, unrelenting heat, even through your simple loincloth. The brilliant white of the freshly crystallized salt is almost blinding under the direct glare of the sun, a stark contrast to the dark reddish-brown clay of the pan itself. It lies there, a fragile, intricate latticework of tiny, interconnected crystals, still damp, still holding some of the residual brine, glistening as if strewn with a million microscopic diamonds. It looks surprisingly beautiful in a stark mineral sort of way, though your current appreciation for its aesthetic qualities is somewhat overshadowed by your profound and all-consuming thirst. This isn't just salt, you might reflect with a weary internal sigh. It's artisanal, sun-dried, hand-scraped, sweat-infused premium Aztec table salt. Or, depending on how much dirt you accidentally include, possibly just high-grade road grit. It's always a fine line. You take up your primary scraping tool, perhaps that worn wooden paddle with its slightly blunted edge, or the large smooth clamshell you favor for its gentle curvature. The precise tools and specific manual techniques employed by Aztec salt harvesters for this delicate yet crucial stage of harvesting, the newly formed, still somewhat damp salt crystals from the bottom of their shallow clay evaporation pans, without incorporating excessive amounts of underlying sediment clay particles or other impurities, and how these nuanced methods might have directly influenced the final purity, the color, and the texture of the various grades of Aztec salt destined for the markets or tribute stores, is an area where experimental replication by modern archaeologists and microscopic analysis of any surviving archaeological salt residues continue to inform scholarly interpretation and understanding. You, however, are operating on generations of passed down practical knowledge and a very keen desire to get this part over with as quickly as possible. With a careful, practiced hand, you begin to gently scrape the layer of damp salt from the bottom of the pan. It is not like scraping dry, loose earth. This salt is still moist, compacted with a slightly gritty crystalline texture that offers a certain resistance to your tool. It's surprisingly cool to the touch, at least initially a result of the ongoing evaporative cooling, a tiny fleeting sensation of relief against your hot calloused fingers before the ambient heat and the warmth of your own hand quickly overwhelm it. If you have any small cuts or abrasions on your hands, which is almost inevitable after a morning spent wrestling with salty earth and rough tools, the intense salinity of this damp harvest now makes itself known with a series of sharp, unwelcome stings. You work with slow, deliberate strokes, trying to lift the salt layer cleanly to get as much of the precious white crystal as possible, while leaving behind the dark clay of the pan. Too much pressure and your scraper will dig into the soft earthenware, contaminating your harvest with unwanted grit. Too little, and you will leave behind a significant portion of the salt, still clinging stubbornly to the bottom. It's a delicate balance, requiring a steady hand and a focused mind, both of which are in rather short supply, given your current state of advanced dehydration and general solar induced befuddlement. Each scrape is a tiny victory against the forces of not having nearly enough salt to meet the tribute quota, which in this particular economic and political climate is a pretty significant motivator. The harvested salt, still damp and heavy with the residual brine, is carefully coaxed into a small growing pile on a clean woven reed mat you've placed beside the pan, or perhaps directly onto a designated patch of relatively clean, hard baked earth. It makes a soft, grating, slightly crunchy sound as it accumulates, a sound that is almost musical to your ears, or would be if your ears weren't currently filled with the high pitched ringing of incipient heat stroke. The salt gleams with a brilliant, almost painful whiteness in the harsh sunlight, each tiny crystal a perfect, multifaceted jewel. Some larger, perfectly cubic halite crystals might occasionally form little geometric marvels. There's a quiet, unspoken belief among some of the older harvesters that these perfectly formed salt spirits are particularly auspicious and should be handled with a special reverence, perhaps even kept as a personal charm for good fortune or a bountiful future harvest, though you suspect most of them just end up in the tribute basket along with everything else. You move from one pan to the next, repeating the process. Scrape, pile, scrape, pile. The sun beats down on your bent back with an unyielding, punishing intensity. Sweat pours into your eyes, stinging them, blurring your vision. Your throat feels like a dry, dusty cave. Your head throbs in time with the rhythmic scraping of your tool, but you continue driven by a grim, ingrained necessity. This salt represents survival for you, for your family, for your community. It is a valuable commodity in the bustling markets of Tenochtitlan and other Aztec cities, traded far and wide for goods. You might otherwise never see colorful feathers from the tropical lowlands, sharp obsidian blades from distant volcanic sources, perhaps even a few precious cacao beans, the currency of the elite. It is also a critical component of the tribute demanded by the ever watchful eyes of the empire. There might be an unspoken rule, a local custom about not speaking during this initial scraping of the fresh salt from the pans. Some believe that human breath or careless words could somehow taint the purity of the newly formed crystals, or perhaps offend Huixtocihuatl, the salt goddess, who is even now observing your labors from her celestial abode. So, you work in silence, a silence broken only by the sounds of your toil and the vast, indifferent hum of the heat-baked flats. The damp salt is surprisingly heavy. Each small pile you create represents a significant weight, a dense concentration of mineral wealth. As you work, you become acutely aware of just how much physical effort will be required to transport this harvest from the flats back to your dwelling or the communal storage area. The thought is not a cheering one, but for now your focus is solely on this immediate task, the careful, meticulous gathering of these glistening white crystals. Pan by pan, your small mounds of damp, heavy salt begin to dot the sun-scorched earth around your now empty evaporation vessels, small, brilliant white beacons in the vast, shimmering desolation. Each pile is a testament to your endurance, a hard-won prize wrested from the very teeth of this unforgiving, sun-blasted landscape. The day is far from over, and the most arduous task of transport still lies ahead. But this crucial stage, the actual harvesting of your salty treasure, is nearing its completion. The sun, though perhaps just beginning its slow, almost imperceptible descent from its absolute zenith, still beats down upon the shimmering salt flats with a ferocious, unwavering intensity. The brief, inadequate respite of your midday meal is a distant memory, and the fire in your throat, though momentarily soothed by those few precious sips of tepid water, has returned with a vengeance, a dry, rasping ache that underscores every labored breath. Before you lie the scattered, glistening white mounds of freshly harvested, still damp salt, your hard-won treasure, your crystalline penance. The task of simply watching water vanish is over. Now begins the equally arduous, if more active labor, of preparing this bounty for its journey. It is time to load the heavy baskets. You select your largest, sturdiest, cheeky whittle, the woven carrying basket, that will be your companion on the agonizing trudge back to your dwelling or the communal collection point. It's made from tough split reeds, or perhaps the fibrous leaves of the maguey plant. Its weave coarse and open, designed more for strength than for comfort, or for preventing the loss of very fine particles. You inspect it quickly for any obvious signs of impending failure, a fraying strap, a weakening bottom, as the last thing you need is for your precious sweat-earned cargo to spill back onto the salt-encrusted earth midway through your journey. To minimize loss of the finer salt through the open weave, and to offer a slight barrier against excessive contamination from the rough basket fibers themselves, you might carefully line the inside with a large tough tree leaf, if any are available, unlikely here, or more. Probably a piece of well-worn, densely woven reed matting, carefully fitted to the basket's interior contours. Then, with a groan that seems to emanate from the very core of your exhausted being, you begin the process of transferring the damp, heavy salt from the small piles on the ground into this waiting basket. You might use your hands, cupping them to scoop the surprisingly cool, gritty crystalline mass, feeling its dampness seep into your already salt-caked skin, the sharp edges of some of the larger crystals digging into your palms. Or perhaps you use one of your smaller clay pots, or even your wooden scraper as a makeshift scoop, a slightly more efficient, if still laborious method. Each scoopful is surprisingly weighty. This is not the light, fluffy, processed table salt of some distant, unimaginable future. This is raw, damp, freshly harvested sea salt from an inland lake, heavy with residual brine, and the sheer, uncompromising density of its mineral nature. You're not just loading salt, You're methodically loading future muscle cramps, a collection of impending back spasms, and a deep philosophical questioning of every single life choice that led you to this particular sun-baked patch of saline misery. The basket, which seemed so light and innocuous when empty, begins to fill with an alarming rapidity, its sides bulging slightly under the increasing pressure, its weight growing with each added scoop. You work with a slow, steady rhythm, trying to conserve your dwindling energy. Bend, scoop, lift, pour. Bend, scoop, lift, pour. The sun beats down on your exposed back, your shoulders, the back of your neck. Sweat when your body can still produce it. In this desiccating heat, drips from your brow and sizzles silently as it hits the hot, salty earth, or worse, drips directly into the basket, adding your own personal human brine to the mix. The sharp, clean, almost metallic scent of the concentrated salt fills your nostrils, a smell so intense it almost seems to taste of itself. In the great Aztec Empire, a realm that stretched from coast to coast, but possessed no beasts of burden, like oxen, horses, or donkeys, all goods, from precious feathers and jaguar pelts, to vital foodstuffs like maize and beans, to heavy building materials like stone and timber, and indeed to essential commodities like this very salt, were transported on the strong, patient backs of human porters, the tlameme, singular tlamama. These professional carriers, often following well-established trade routes, would bear immense loads, sometimes exceeding what a modern person might consider humanly possible for many leagues. Their burdens supported by a mekapal, a woven strap passed across the forehead or chest. While you are a harvester, not a full-time tlamama, the principle of human porterage, the reliance on sheer human strength and endurance, underpins this entire process. Your salt destined for the markets of Tenochtitlan, or the tribute coffers of the empire, will begin its journey on your own aching back. The average carrying capacity routinely expected of an individual Aztec tlamama, and the typical distances they might cover in a single day when transporting such heavy bulk commodities across the often challenging terrain of Mesoamerica, are estimations often based on interpretations of admiring, if sometimes perhaps exaggerated, early colonial Spanish accounts, as well as comparative ethnographic data from other traditional porterage cultures. Direct contemporaneous Aztec archaeological evidence for precise load limits and rigidly enforced daily travel distances remains, as with so many aspects of commoners' lives, relatively scarce and open to ongoing scholarly interpretation. You might have a particular, almost ritualistic way of loading the basket, ensuring the weight is distributed as evenly as possible, perhaps placing some of the finer, looser salt towards the bottom and the heavier, more compacted crystalline crusts on top. Or maybe there's a quiet, rhythmic chant, a sequence of breathy, almost tuneless sounds that you and your fellow harvesters sometimes use when engaged in particularly heavy or repetitive labor, a communal vocalization believed by some to lighten the load psychologically, or to invoke a measure of strength and endurance from the gods of labor and the earth. It probably doesn't make the salt any physically lighter, but it might make the act of lifting it feel fractionally less soul-destroying. Each basket, when filled, is basically a portable, all-natural, custom-designed lower back destruction kit. As the first basket nears its capacity, a capacity determined less by its actual volume and more by what you can physically agonizingly hope to lift and carry, you pause, wiping your sweaty, gritty hands on your loincloth. You look at the remaining piles of salt, and then at the empty baskets still waiting. It seems an impossible task. The sun is still high, the heat unrelenting your thirst, a raging fire. But the salt must be moved. It is the entire purpose of your being here, of this day's suffering. You take a moment to adjust the woven straps of the basket, perhaps padding them with a folded piece of rough cloth. If you have one, a meager attempt to lessen the inevitable chafing and pressure on your shoulders or forehead, depending on how you intend to carry it. You eye the now monumentally heavy basket with a mixture of pride in your harvest and a deep, visceral dread of the effort required to transport it. This salt is so heavy, it feels like it's developing its own minor gravitational pull, or maybe that's just your will to live slowly collapsing under the weight of it all. One by one, you fill your allotted baskets, each one a repetition of the same back-straining, muscle-screaming effort. The sun crawls with agonizing slowness across the sky, each movement a tiny incremental increase in your suffering. The salt flats shimmer, the air vibrates with heat, and your world shrinks to the simple, brutal reality of scoop lift pour and the ever-growing weight of your hard-won, painfully extracted, crystalline burden. Your collection of filled baskets now sits there, squat and heavy monuments to your toil, their contents gleaming with a fierce white intensity under the unforgiving sun. The next stage, the journey back, looms before you, an agonizing prospect of sheer, unadulterated heavy lifting. You eye the collection of filled baskets with a deep sense of foreboding, each one a squat, bulging testament to your earlier labors, each one now radiating an almost palpable aura of immense back-breaking weight. The sun, though perhaps beginning a very slow, almost imperceptible descent from its midday zenith, still blazes with a fierce, unyielding intensity, baking the salt flats and your own weary frame with equal impartiality. The brief, inadequate reprieve of your meager meal is long forgotten, and the fire of thirst still rages in your throat, a constant agonizing reminder of your body's desperate need. But the salt, your precious crystalline harvest, cannot transport itself. That, unfortunately, is your department. You are now a human pack mule minus any union-mandated rest breaks, or a complimentary bag of surprisingly nutritious oats at the end of your shift. You select the first basket, perhaps not even the largest one, testing its heft. It is, as suspected, astonishingly heavy. The damp salt, compacted and dense, feels like a solid block of wet stone. You take a moment to adjust the mecapal, the woven carrying strap that will distribute some of this crushing weight across your forehead and down your spine, a piece of simple but essential Aztec porterage technology. The strap is coarse, made from maguey fibers, and you know from bitter experience that it will soon begin to bite into your skin, leaving a raw, chafing line across your brow. Some porters might try to pad it with a folded piece of cloth or a few broad leaves if such luxuries are available. But today, you have only your own toughened skin and grim determination. Bracing your legs, you bend your knees, trying to lift with your thighs rather than your already protesting back, a piece of ancestral wisdom that is easier to remember than to consistently apply when exhaustion is gnawing at your every muscle. With a grunt that is part effort, part despair, you hoist the basket onto your back, maneuvering the mecapal into position across your forehead. The weight settles upon you, a sudden, crushing, almost unbearable burden. It presses you down, driving the air from your lungs, making your knees tremble. For a moment, you stagger, fighting for balance, the landscape swimming before your eyes. Each step you're about to take is a fresh reminder that gravity is not just a good idea, it's the undisputed law of this particular universe. And it is currently using your entire skeletal structure as its personal chew toy. And then you begin the trudge, the long, salty trudge homeward, or at least towards the designated collection point, where your hard-won tribute will be tallied. The first few steps are an agony. Your muscles scream in protest. Your back arches under the strain. The macaple digs into your forehead, sending jolts of pain through your skull. The rough fibers of the basket chafe against your sweaty, salt-encrusted skin. But you plod onward, one slow, deliberate, agonizing step at a time. Your personal motto for this particular extended part of your day, often repeated silently through gritted teeth, is something along the lines of, just keep trudging, just keep trudging. What is it that we do when faced with impossible burdens and a distinct lack of sensible alternatives? We trudge, trudge, trudge. The path back is the same dusty, uneven track you traversed in the cool darkness of the pre-dawn, but it feels entirely different now. Then it was cool underfoot, the world quiet and expectant. Now it is a shimmering heat radiating inferno. Each stone a tiny ember, each patch of dust a choking cloud. The sun, though no longer directly overhead, still beats down with a relentless, angled fury, searing your left side, then your right, as the path winds its way across the desolate flats. There is no escape from its glare, no respite from its heat. Your world shrinks to the few feet of baked earth directly in front of your shuffling feet. You focus on placing one foot carefully in front of the other, on maintaining your balance, on simply not collapsing under the immense, unforgiving weight of your load. The landscape around you, the distant shimmering lake, the hazy purple mountains, the vast, empty sky, becomes a blur, an irrelevant backdrop to your personal portable universe of pain and effort. The degree to which chronic fatigue, various musculoskeletal injuries, and severely debilitating repetitive strain conditions likely affected the daily lives, the overall working capacity, and the long-term health outcomes of Aztec commoners who were regularly involved in such constant heavy porterage activities as salt transport, especially given the well-documented and complete absence of wheeled transport or any large draft animals in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, is a key area of ongoing interest and somber investigation for bioarchaeologists who meticulously examine skeletal remains for the telltale markers of such lifelong occupational stress and hardship. You are currently generating a wealth of future data for their studies. The salt itself, your precious cargo, seems to grow heavier with every step. It shifts and settles in the basket, its damp weight, a live, malevolent thing constantly trying to throw you off balance. A fine, salty dust escapes from the weave of the basket, powdering your back, stinging your eyes, and adding another layer of gritty discomfort to your already parched mouth. You can taste it, smell it, feel it, grinding into your skin. You are becoming one with the salt, a slow-moving pillar of saline misery. Perhaps there is a particular gnarled and ancient mesquite tree, a solitary, tenacious survivor in this harsh landscape that marks the halfway point of your journey. Its meager, feathery shade is a cruel illusion offering no real relief. But the sight of it, when it finally agonizingly comes into view, might provide a tiny, almost imperceptible lift to your spirits. Or maybe there's a specific type of small, dusty brown ground bird, a creature almost invisible against the baked earth that always seems to flit alongside salt harvesters. On their return journey, its cheerful, persistent chirping, either a welcome distraction or an incredibly annoying commentary on your suffering, depending on your current level of charitable interpretation. It's probably just hoping you'll spill some of your precious cargo, or perhaps disturb a few tasty insects with your lumbering passage. You might pass other figures, other salt harvesters, also bent under their heavy loads, their faces grim masks of effort and exhaustion. No words are exchanged. There is no energy for conversation, only a shared silent understanding of the brutal, unyielding demands of this life. Each is locked in their own private world of pain, their own slow, agonizing battle against weight, heat, and distance. The thirst, which was already a torment, now becomes an all-consuming, raging inferno. Your water gourd is long empty, or perhaps you have a few jealously guarded drops remaining, which you dare not consume, yet saving them for a moment of even greater desperation that you know is still to come. Your tongue feels like a piece of dried leather. Your head pounds. The shimmering heat haze plays tricks with your vision, conjuring up illusory pools of cool, inviting water that vanish like smoke when you draw nearer. But still, you trudge on, one foot, then the other, the rhythm of your suffering. The sun crawls across the sky, its descent agonizingly slow. The shadows lengthen but offer no coolness, no relief. Then finally, after what feels like a lifetime of sun-baked, salt-laden torment, you see it in the hazy distance. The familiar welcome and almost unbelievable sight of your small village or the designated tribute collection point. Its low adobe dwellings or simple thatched roofs shimmering like a promised land. The end of this particular Via Dolorosa, this long salty trudge, is at last blessedly within sight. The site of your small familiar village, or perhaps the designated collection point with its dusty sun-baked plaza and the slightly more substantial adobe structure that serves as the local tribute storehouse, instills a final desperate surge of energy into your utterly depleted limbs. Each step of that long, salty trudge from the distant flats has been an agony, a testament to human endurance, or perhaps just human stubbornness in the face of a truly unreasonable workload. The sun, though now beginning its slow, majestic dip toward the western horizon, painting the sky in deepening hues of orange and dusty rose, still possesses enough residual heat to make the air feel like the inside of a baker's oven. But the very end of this particular torment is finally blessedly in sight. You stumble the last few paces, your vision blurring, with a combination of sweat, salt, sting, and sheer overwhelming fatigue. The heavy basket, your constant crushing companion, for what feels like several lifetimes, seems to have melded itself to your back. Its rough fibers a permanent chafing imprint on your skin, the macaples strap a band of fire across your forehead. Other harvesters, equally burdened, equally exhausted, are also converging on this point, a slow, silent procession of human beasts of burden, their faces grim masks of dust and weariness. You reach the spot where the Calpixqui, the local tribute collector and representative of the distant, insatiable Triple Alliance, awaits. He is, as usual, seated in the shade of a meager awning, perhaps on a low-carved wooden stool that signifies his elevated status, looking cool, clean, and remarkably unsweaty compared to the likes of you. He might be idly fanning himself with a brightly feathered fan or making notations on a piece of folded amatyl paper. With a sharpened reed, his expression one of bored imperial indifference. He is the embodiment of the empire's reach, the final destination for your day's agonizing labor. The overseer inspects your salt, and indeed your very soul, with the detached enthusiasm of someone meticulously examining a particularly dull, if dutifully presented pebble. Clearly, he didn't have to personally carry several tons of it across a sun-blasted hellscape today. With a groan that is more animal than human, a sound torn from the very depths of your exhausted being, you allow the basket to slide from your back or carefully unloop the mecapole from your burning forehead. The thud as it hits the packed earth is a sound sweeter than any temple chant, more melodious than any flute. The sudden absence of that crushing weight is a moment of almost spiritual ecstasy, so profound that your legs tremble violently and you nearly pitch forward onto your face. You stand there swaying slightly, your muscles screaming in silent protest, your body feeling strangely, unnaturally light, as if you might float away on the evening breeze. The Calpixqui gestures languidly without rising for you to present your offering. You drag the heavy basket forward, or perhaps tip its contents onto a large, communal woven mat, laid out for the purpose, adding your contribution to the growing mound of coarse, off-white glistening salt crystals. Other harvesters are doing the same, their movements slow, almost dreamlike with fatigue. The air here is thick with the sharp mineral tang of salt, the dusty scent of dried earth, and the faint, not entirely unpleasant aroma of honest, if extremely overdue human sweat. The overseer might prod at your pile of salt with the end of his staff or scoop up a small handful to examine its texture, its color, its purity, his expression unreadable. The precise mechanisms for consistent quality assessment and the standardized valuation of such diverse and often variably produced tribute goods as different grades of salt collected at these numerous far-flung local points throughout the vast and sprawling Aztec Empire, and the exact degree of potential negotiation, underlying dispute, or even subtle corruption that might have occasionally occurred between the local primary producers and the often powerful and sometimes feared imperial Calpixque are intricate and fascinating areas of study where surviving historical codices from the Aztec world and later Spanish colonial accounts sometimes offer conflicting, ambiguous, or limited explicit detail, often requiring careful critical cross-referencing with ongoing archaeological findings and economic modeling. For you, the assessment is simple. You have brought salt. You hope it is enough. You hope it is acceptable. He might make a notation, perhaps a quick deft mark on his amatyl paper, or by adding another pebble to a specific pile in a complex system of tallying, or even by tying a new knot in a colored string, a rudimentary but effective accounting method for keeping track of the community's contributions. There might be a specific, almost ritualistic phrase you are expected to utter upon delivering your tribute, a formal acknowledgement of your duty to the Huey Tlatoani, the great speaker, the emperor in far-off magnificent Tenochtitlan, or perhaps a quick mumbled offering of words to Huixtotzihuatl, the salt goddess, hoping her favor will ensure your efforts are well received. Some communities even have the custom of taking a tiny pinch of the freshly delivered salt and casting it onto a small sacred fire that might be kept burning near the collection point, a symbolic offering back to the earth and the deities who permitted its extraction. Your payment for this day of almost superhuman exertion and sun scorched misery, it is not in glittering cacao beans, not in brightly colored cotton mantles, not even in an extra ration of maize. Your payment is the immense, overwhelming satisfaction of not being immediately seized, berated, and possibly flogged by Sergeant Grimbold's Aztec equivalent for failing to meet your expected quota. Plus, you know the continued, if somewhat tenuous, privilege of existence within the glorious, all-encompassing, and ever-demanding Aztec Empire. And perhaps, if the harvest has been particularly good, and the Kalpixsquai is feeling unusually magnanimous, a rare celestial alignment indeed, a very small portion of the salt might be allocated back to your community, to your family, for your own meager domestic needs. But most of it, this white gold wrested from the earth with your sweat and your aching muscles, now belongs to the empire destined for the storehouses of Tenochtitlan, for the tables of nobles, for the preservation of meats, to feed armies, for the rituals that keep the cosmos in balance. And, scene, your salt has now officially, and rather unceremoniously, joined the rapidly expanding property of the extremely important and probably very well-fed people currently residing in Tenochtitlan collection. The Kalpixsquai, having made his assessment and his notation, dismisses you with a curt nod or a wave of his feathered fan. Your part in this grand imperial transaction is complete. You are free to go, or rather, free to crawl away and collapse. An almost unbelievable wave of exhaustion, a weariness so profound it feels as though your very bones are dissolving, now washes over you, a wave that had been held at bay only by the desperate need to complete your journey and deliver your load. You gather your empty basket, your now ridiculously light leaching pots, your worn scraper, these faithful if humble companions of your toil. Your duty for the day, in this regard at least, is finally, truly, irrevocably done. You turn empty-handed save for your tools and begin the slow, stumbling shuffle towards your own small adobe dwelling, towards the promise of shade of water, however little remains, and of the blessed, all-encompassing, and desperately craved oblivion of sleep. Each step towards your small adobe dwelling is a monumental effort, a fresh negotiation between your screaming muscles and your indomitable, if utterly exhausted, will. The empty baskets and your few simple tools, which felt so light when you first picked them up this morning in the pre-dawn chill, now seem to possess a surprising leaden weight, a final petty insult from a day that has already extracted its full measure of your strength. The sun, though now sinking towards the western horizon and casting long attenuated shadows that offer no real coolness, still feels like a malevolent presence, its heat a lingering brand on your salt-caked skin. The sounds of the village, the murmur of voices, the occasional laughter of children, the rhythmic thud of someone grinding maize for the evening meal, reach your ears as if from a great distance, a world away from the private internal landscape of your profound fatigue. You have achieved a state of exhaustion so profound it feels as though it should probably have its own dedicated hieroglyph in the sacred codices, perhaps depicting a very small, very tired human figure being aggressively sat upon by a very large, very hot sun. You finally reach the low, familiar doorway of your hut. Your hand, clumsy and trembling with weariness, fumbles with the woven reed mat that serves as a door, pushing it aside. You stumble across the threshold into the relative dimness and comparative coolness of the interior. It is not much, this small, earth floored space, but after the relentless glare and baking heat of the salt flats, it feels like a sanctuary, a shadowy haven. The air inside is still thick with the familiar sense of wood smoke, dried herbs, and the faint underlying aroma of everyday human existence. It smells like not being actively cooked by the sun, which at this particular moment is the most luxurious perfume imaginable. There is no energy left for evening rituals, no thought of preparing food, no inclination towards conversation. You drop your tools and empty baskets by the doorway with a dull thud, the sound echoing loudly in your ringing ears. Your only desire, your sole, all consuming focus, is the blessed oblivion promised by your humble sleeping mat, your patat, which lies waiting in the corner like a long lost friend. Your bed, a simple reed mat, your lullaby for the evening, the insistent high pitched symphony of your own aching joints, and the distant mournful cries of particularly pessimistic night birds. Five-star accommodations, ancient Aztec style. You don't even bother to remove your meager, salt-stiffened loincloth or simple tunic if you still wear one. The effort is simply too great. With a groan that seems to emanate from the very core of your being, a sound that speaks of muscles stretched beyond their limit, and a spirit worn thin by sun and toil, you collapse more than lie down onto the rough, familiar surface of the mat. It offers no softness, no yielding comfort, only the unyielding reality of woven reeds upon packed earth. But it is horizontal, and at this moment, horizontal is a state of grace, a profound luxury. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is not a peaceful, velvety black. It is a swirling, chaotic riot of residual light, the ghostly afterimage of the sun's relentless glare, still burning fiercely, a white-hot disk imprinted on your retinas. Even with your eyes shut tight, the sun is still there, a final taunting reminder of its dominion over your day. Your skin still prickles with its phantom heat. Your throat is still a parched, aching desert. Your muscles throb with a deep, rhythmic pain that seems to pulse in time with your weary heartbeat. The sounds of the village outside, the gentle noises of evening settling over your small community, begin to fade to recede, as if you are sinking slowly into deep, still water. Your breathing is harsh, ragged, each inhalation a conscious effort, each exhalation a shuddering release. Sleep isn't just calling your name, it's screaming it at the top of its lungs through a metaphorical megaphone fashioned from pure, unadulterated systemic fatigue. The concept of an afterlife for Aztec commoners. Like yourself, those who died an ordinary death from toil or sickness, rather than gloriously in battle or in childbirth, was often centered around Mictlan, a somber, 9-level underworld that required a long and arduous journey to reach. Right now, Mictlan sounds like a rather appealing holiday destination, compared to the prospect of facing another day on those sun-blasted salt flats. Your current descent into unconsciousness feels like a small daily rehearsal for that much longer, much quieter journey. Perhaps in these last fleeting moments of semi-awareness, you manage a single mumbled, almost incoherent prayer or invocation to the night deities, or to whatever household gods might be listening, a plea for protection through the hours of darkness, a hope for a sleep untroubled by nightmares of endless white expanses. or drowning in oceans of salt. Dreams that are said to be an occupational hazard for those who toil as you do. The precise nature of sleep patterns, the content of dreams, and the cultural interpretation of these nocturnal wanderings of the soul within ancient Aztec society, particularly among the vast commoner population whose direct textual or personal accounts are virtually non existent, and whether they held distinct beliefs or specific practices regarding dream interpretation or perceived spiritual journeys during sleep that differed significantly from the more extensively documented and often politically charged views of the nobility or the specialized priesthood, is an area where scholarly understanding relies heavily on careful inference from broader cosmological beliefs, surviving artistic representations, and often sparse or later ethnographic parallels. You, however, are not pondering the ethnographic significance of your imminent unconsciousness. You are simply done. The last vestiges of thought, of sensation, of awareness begin to unravel, to dissolve. The aching in your back, the fire in your throat, the phantom sun burning behind your eyelids, even these powerful immediate sensations start to become distant, muted, as if they belong to someone else, some other poor, unfortunate soul. There is only the immense, irresistible gravitational pull of oblivion. You are not so much falling asleep as being claimed by it, a willing, or at least entirely unresisting captive. The day is over. The salt has been won. And you, its harvester, are finally, completely, and utterly surrendering to the welcome darkness. And so, as the last faint imprint of the blazing sun finally fades from behind your closed eyelids, you descend into a sleep so profound it feels like sinking into the cool, dark earth itself. The aches of your body, the sting of salt on your skin, the deep, consuming weariness of your spirit. All these burdens begin to soften, to lighten, to drift away like dust on a desert wind. The sounds of the night, the distant call of an owl, the rustle of unseen creatures, the very whisper of the air in your small dwelling, all merge into a single soothing, undifferentiated hum, a lullaby as ancient as the stars that now watch over your slumber. There is no more toil, no more sun, no more thirst, only the deep, unbroken peace of absolute exhaustion, the body's final, grateful surrender. Let the darkness be a comforting blanket, cool and soft, enfolding you completely. Let your breathing be slow and even, each breath drawing you further into this profound state of rest where the world and its demands can no longer reach you. You have earned this oblivion, this small nightly death that allows for the possibility of a new, if equally arduous, dawn. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. The salt and the sun can wait.